Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, once again to the Sustainability Summit 2020. Of course, we had a tricky start to the day, but as mentioned earlier, that we're not chartering shallow waters. We are going for the deep waters. So once again, thank you to our former, or rather the Deputy Minister, for the welcome address. We're now going to have our African Sustainable Cities Dialogue. What does sustainabilities in our cities look like, rather? So leading that conversation, we have our facilitator, Kobe Brand, Regional Director of ICLEI Africa, who he's also, or she is also rather, the Deputy Secretary General. Kobe Brand, over to you, and welcome.
Good afternoon, good morning, and even good evening to everybody who's joining us from around the world. Here in South Africa, it's morning, and I'm very pleased on behalf of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, to be chairing this session as part of the Sustainability Week and the Sustainability Summit 2020. Indeed, it's an honor to work with the organizers once again of Sustainability Week, as ICLEI Africa has been a long-standing collaborator and partner to these annual Sustainability Week events that take place in South Africa. So thank you very much for inviting ICLEI to be part of this session. And let me, with no further ado, quickly introduce myself and take us through how this next hour is going to work. My name is Kobe Brandt. I'm the Regional Director of ICLEI in Africa, and also globally the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI. So here in ICLEI Africa, we work with a wide range of local governments and regional governments, large and small. Some of our largest members are, for instance, Lagos State Government, and we also have very small municipalities, almost rural municipalities that we work with across Africa. It is my pleasure to be hosting this session where we're going to zoom in to get a mayoral view of what our local leaders think about and what their issues and opportunities are when they tackle the issue of sustainability. And of course, sustainability can be quite a broad term, but in the local context, in a city, it's almost where everything comes together. In a way, the city is the perfect nexus where all the sustainability issues, and in fact, indeed, all the global agendas that we are battling with today and that we are having to come to grips with are actually manifested. And it's also here at this local level where we are best placed through strong leadership and decisive actions on a daily basis that we can make a difference, city by city, town by town, state by state, towards a more sustainable world and, of course, a more sustainable Africa, where we know that Africa is urbanizing at a more rapid rate than anywhere else in the world, and where we also have a very big youth bulge. In other words, our youth population is very large, which only spells great things for the continent. But at the same time, the continent is also battling with all the big issues that the rest of the world's battling with, including climate change, including rapid and unprecedented biodiversity loss just in our lifetimes, as well as what we know, the COVID pandemic and everything that comes with it, the economic woes, the health woes, etc. So our continent is not spared from these global challenges, but our continent has got a couple of things in our favor, including our youth, our entrepreneurship, and the fact that Africa is always going to be the continent from where humanity comes from and where humanity will come towards for inspiration. And today we'll hear it again from our inspirational leaders. So my name is Kobe Brandt, as I said, from ICLEI Africa, and I'm joined also by my fellow panelist, Mr. Paul Curry, who is a senior professional officer and the head of our urban systems unit in ICLEI Africa, and Ms. Solofina Nkesa, who heads up a number of agendas in our office as a professional officer, including at this stage food, but also very involved in transport and also very involved in waste management and buildings. So Solofina and Paul, very warm welcome to you. before I come to you for a couple of reflections from your side, having spoken and engaged with so many mayors during this unprecedented year, let me quickly also turn to other panelists. We are going to first give the floor to Ms. Lord Mayor Rowie Malik Lowe, who is the Mayor of Banjul in Gambia and the President of the African Capital Cities for Sustainable Development. So, and that forum, of course, has a new presidium, and Mayor Lowe is the incoming president, the first female president, woman president of the ACCSF. So it is my pleasure to move to her, but before I do, let me just introduce also the next speaker who's going to join us also like Mayor Lowe, remotely and in a pre-recording mode. And this is her Honorable Gloria Tima Gumbru, who's the Municipal Chief Executive of the Municipal Council Alpha Recrom, of course, from Ghana. So a very inspirational young lady as well. Let's give these two remarkable ladies, women leaders from Africa, the floor and hear their insights. I know that Mayor Lowe has a specific passion for women's rights and the whole gender issue, and we're going to hear from her first. So, Paul, I'm going to hand over to you to start the recording, which Mayor Lowe did for us yesterday for this session. Thank you very much.
Good morning from the Gambia. Women and youth hold an extremely important role in environmental management and development, as empowerment is a process, and sustainable development encompasses social, cultural, economic, and environmental aspects. This topic covers a wide domain. My council is in collaboration with UNDP and the UN in localizing the global goals to end poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I believe that by working with our women and youth and empowering them is the key to achieving these goals and sustainable development. To give you just one example, here in Banjul, together with the European Union, we have planted 5,000 coconut trees. These trees, when fully grown, will bring employment to our women and youth, as they will be able to sell the coconuts so that they may earn an income from them. These trees will also serve to mitigate coastal erosion, thereby preserving our beautiful beaches, which is of utmost importance to destination Gambia. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable colleagues, the tourism industry here in the Gambia is the second largest employment sector, and as sustainable tourism addresses several of the SDGs, the outcomes of this little project will result in tremendous value to our community and will positively impact and empower our women and youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And I think everybody will agree with us with in such capable and passionate hands as we have here from Mayor Lowe, the African Capital City Sustainability Forum is only going to go from strength to strength. I should also mention that the new presidium that has just been elected of the African Capital City Sustainability Forum consists of three mayors, first vice and second vice mayor, that will support Mayor Lowe in this important task. So we have also as first vice mayor the mayor of Dakar, and the second vice mayor, the mayor of Morocco. The three of them will together build the African Capital Sustainability Cities, African Capital City Sustainability Forum further. And we hope that one day, once again, we can have a united Sustainability Week here in South Africa and invite the African Capital Cities Sustainability Forum to once again join forces, because after all, it is here in the city of Tshwane, our own capital here in South Africa, where the African capital cities decided to form their Sustainability Forum, and where they also held their inaugural meeting. In fact, a number of their first meetings were held and hosted very graciously by our own capital city, the city of Tshwane. So thank you very much for those opening remarks, Mayor Lowy. And now I would like to give the floor to another pre-recorded lady, as I mentioned. This is the CEO, Ms. Gloria Gumbra, and she is going to speak about the challenges around that the municipality faces around sustainability, addressing sustainability at the local level, and also about what they do about that in terms of their policies and framework. So Ms. Gloria Tima Gumbru, as I mentioned, is the CEO of Afawa Rikrom, which is the municipal council in Ghana. Real strong voice of an small intermediate city. But of course, we know that it is these small intermediate cities that are also playing a vital role in the new Africa, because it's there where urbanization happens more rapidly than anywhere else. And it's there where we need strong leadership, and also where we see a lot of these mayors stepping forward, mayors and their CEOs and their staff stepping forward to address sustainability issues in unprecedented ways, especially as is called for in these unprecedented times. So I'd like to hand the floor to the Chief Executive to get her insights all the way from Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The key challenge has to do with data. We don't have an accurate data on all the businesses within the municipality. We don't have accurate data on all the properties within the municipality. And it is affecting us in terms of revenue mobilization. But with the properties, now we are working with GIZ to get all our properties and the streets named. With that exercise, we are able to get some information, and I'm sure that by the end of the exercise, we will be able to get the number of businesses we have, the properties we have within the municipality. But when it comes to the businesses, even because we are lacking with data, it is difficult to use softwares or apps to mobilize or collect your revenue. And when people are using manual receipts like the GCRs to collect revenue, it is easy for them to steal some of the money. Let me put it that way. But if there had been a system, an automation system, whereby you have everything captured on an app or a software, which you can easily know that, oh, this person is supposed to pay 2,000 at the end of the year. And the person has paid 1,000. It hits the system for you to know. You can track every revenue collector wherever the person is. But with the system as it is now, it is not helping at all. We have started with the GIZ one on the property, but with the business now, before we can get the system, I'm working with the GCB Bank to collect my property rate for me. Fortunately for me, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology is within my municipality, and for that matter, we have a large number of elites within the municipality. And for that matter, we are saying that property owners now should pay through GCB money alert instead of paying to the revenue collectors, and then we'll keep some of the money. So it is a step ahead. But then we are still thinking of getting the best way to have everything captured on a computer so that we can put in place the best measures to make sure we get all the money that we're supposed to get as an assembly and can develop the municipality with such funds. My first agenda was that as a municipal assembly, you look at health issues. You are in charge of education issues. You are in charge of a whole lot, everything concerning the municipality, you have to work on it. But then when I wanted to come up with a strategic plan for the municipality, I realized that if I have to do this, it has to be in line with the SDG because we are all working to ensure that we all achieve the 2030 goals. And for that matter, that alone, I would say, gave me the passion to based or to use the SDGs as my main thematic areas for the plan. And I also thought that if I use the SDGs goals, some of the goals for the plan, it means that gradually we are working towards the realization of the goals. That is the main reason why we use the goals. And for that matter, the first one, which is the third on the SDG, the third SDG goal, good health and well-being, is the first thematic area on my strategic plan. The quality education is the second one on my plan, but with the SDG, it is the fourth. That's why I said that I picked the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then the 13th. So you can see that I have the gender equality in there. That's why when you talked about the gender league, I said I'm interested at that one as well. So the plan is to ensure that we develop the municipality based on the SDG. I mean, it goes 17, but then we cannot implement all of them at the same time. So we prioritize by picking these 5 from the SDG.
I think two remarkable issues that were highlighted here today, and we'll talk a little bit more about the SDGs. But I think it's also very important that as the number one issue, the CEO Gumbro actually highlighted the issue of data and all aspects of data, not just the integrity of the data and the access to the data, but also the IT systems needed to actually engage with that data and meaningfully bring it into policies and decision making and filter that through into the actions of local governments. That is an issue that is particularly prevalent across the African continent, but not only in Africa. I think maybe the issues are slightly different about data around the world, but I think the whole world at this stage, mayors from all around the world are speaking about data issues, whether it's overflow of information in some instances, non-standardized data, so that the one can't compare with the other, and we're not comparing apples with apples in many instances, but also specifically when it comes to disasters and pandemics, and where cities are at the cold face, where they have to have rapid actions on a daily basis. They need access to data. And what's particularly interesting, or actually scary in a way, in Africa, is that we do not have a lot of good census data in terms of our populations. So many cities, many leaders are telling us that it's very difficult to put early prevention and early action strategies in place when it comes to disaster risk reduction and disaster management altogether, which will of course include responses to pandemics, because they do not have that census data of who lives where and how many people are actually in what parts of a city. And then how to reach them is another challenge altogether. So there are many aspects of this data challenge. And ICLEI and our colleagues in this field in support of cities are working at mechanisms. There's a lot of movement, very encouraging movement towards citizen data and citizen actions when it comes to accessing and supporting this data that is embedded, inherent in a city, but not necessarily captured and accessible and quickly accessible when needed. So that brings me to the second point that was raised by the CEO. And CEO Gumbru spoke about the importance of SDGs and the localization of SDGs. This was spontaneous from their side with help of the international community, but there's also a very widespread recognition that we have found from local leaders across Africa around the importance of the SDGs and about the localization of SDGs. We know that the world is not on track to meet the SDGs, but the mayors also realize that we've got to get things right at the city. It's at that local level where we can actually make a difference to get those figures and those graphs up looking much better in terms of attaining the SDGs. And the UN has declared the next decade, starting in January, just a month away from now, exactly 1 month away from now, the decade, UN Decade of Action for the attainment of the SDGs. It also has announced that on the 1st of January, the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration will start. And of course, ecosystem restoration, with that comes not only biodiversity and restoring our natural systems, but also our food systems and many other aspects of that. So with just being fair to the ladies and to the gentlemen who are the leaders in our local governments, I'm now going to give the floor to our last mayor before I turn to our panelists. This is Mayor Sefiani. He is from the city of Chefchaouen in Morocco. Very forward-thinking, progressive policies and strategies that Mayor Sefiani and his team are deploying in the city. And Mayor Sefiani is also, of course, as we know, a leading figure both in UCLG and in ICLEI, and also in the Global Covenant of Mayors. So Mayor Sefiani, with all his global hats on, and also firstly his hat on as Mayor of Chefchaouen, I give the floor to Mayor Sefiani before I'll return to our panel of ICLEI colleagues for their insights and reflections. Thank you. Over to Mayor Sefiani.
Yes, in fact, not only is my vision, in the vision, common vision, we had made together with civil societies, with elected people, with functionaries, we have made Chefchaouen 2030. And Chefchaouen 2030 is shown of the future, sustainable Chefchaouen and inclusive Chefchaouen. And that means that we want our city that began one eco-cities, one cities who we have sustainable energy, we use renewable energy concretely in the city by using solar energy, by using wind energy in our city, transportation, collective transportation, electric transportation, and clean transportation. We want to manage better and better water, potable water, and waste management, and the biodiversity in the city, and urban agriculture, and creating green jobs in our city. So is why is our vision of Chefchaouen in 2030 sustainability.
So Mayor Sefiani actually summarized a whole lot of issues. He mentioned inclusivity. In other words, speaking to the leaving no one behind movement that we as city organizations also put our voice and our actions behind, but also speaking about renewable energy, clean transportation, water and waste management, biodiversity, green jobs, and much more. So we're almost seeing that systems thinking coming through. Paul, and I want to turn to you. As the head of our urban systems unit at ICLEI Africa, how do we know that cities are functional systems. How do you think, and reflecting on what we've heard from our city leaders here today, how do you think we can address the problems and the issues around sustainability in the African context by thinking in a more systemic way about addressing them?
Thanks, Kobe. And I think what we're seeing and what we're hearing from our engagements with local government officers and mayors is this tension between how all of the systems that they're responsible for are intertwined, but how the management process and the public administration systems are focused in silos. And this will be a familiar point to anyone who's working on cities, is how do you support integration across sectors, across departments and cities? How do you create an environment in which there are more opportunities for conversation and learning? Curiously enough, the current situation in which we've all gone online has allowed different departments to speak perhaps more easily, but also it requires more purpose. So what types of programs are we putting in place for different departments to work together? And then it really does take vision of mayors or department leaders to draw the connections between, for example, the built infrastructure that we're laying, the food systems that are moved in by vehicles on the roads that we're laying, the water drainage systems that accompany these roads. Are they making use of green infrastructure to clean that water, to provide services? And so our role, and I think as sustainable urbanists, is to draw these connections with and for cities and excite them about the possibility of cross-departmental finance to support a larger goal. And then just one last point, it's also how do you measure progress? And so the way that we set the indicators of success, both of performance and outcomes, is vital, both departmentally and individually, to allow people to take risks, to try new things, to experiment. So there's a lot of really interesting work in South Africa that I think could offer lessons in many cities or local governments around of trying to rationalize these indicators. And that's led by Department of the National Treasury and Environment, Forestry and Fisheries in the form of Circular 88. So that's really worth keeping an eye on.
I'd love to dive deeper into the indicator discussion, and I think that is something also that cities grapple with, because the SDGs were not necessarily written with indicators in mind that are easily achievable at the local level. So there's almost like the global goals and ambitions out there, and then there's a lot of work that needs to happen before it actually manifests itself in a meaningful way. And link to basic service delivery at the city level or at the local level. So that process of almost taking the global and, translating it into actions that are also speaking to the core mandates of municipalities is very important. And in that aspect, I'm also very excited about the DBSA and the work of COCTA here in South Africa in that regard. And as ICLEI, we're very much engaged in that process. But again, at global level, if you think about indicators, maybe indicators are easier when it comes to, for instance, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, because you work with really fixed and concrete numbers here that you can compare. But when it comes to, for instance, mainstreaming nature and biodiversity or valuing the value of nature in a city, that becomes a lot less measured in the same sort of terms, because there are some indicative measurements that take a much longer to manifest. For instance, we're now starting to hear that COVID-19 is going to have a lasting health impact, psychological health impact in our communities, and also a long-term nutrition impact, perhaps, in the poorer communities who are deprived of healthy food, who've lost jobs and are now poverty-stricken. and it may be a long road to recovery, apart from the direct health consequences, in terms of what the disease itself brings to humanity. And with that aspect of food and nutrition in mind, Solofina, may I turn to you? I know that you've run a very, very successful African City Food Month this year, with a whole lot of partners, cities, and other role players. What are your insights when it comes to sustainability and the food challenge and nutrition challenge that our continent is facing?
Thank you so much, Kobe. And this has been a particularly very vital year in respect to food. And this is primarily because of the COVID pandemic and the impact it had on food or food systems within, especially the urban areas. And during our interactions with the stakeholders and local government officials during our African City Food Month, and also other interactions we've had around food-related projects, is that, you know, for the very first time, the weaknesses of urban food systems were laid bare. And here we saw there were disruptions, especially with the supply chains of food in urban areas. And then there were issues of waste accumulation amidst service disruptions in cities. And then the issues of food insecurity and inequality to access to nutritious food were magnified in cities. So, and these are just some of the few. And then we also saw issues of food markets and retail areas. They could not access some of the basic nutritious supplies for urban citizens. So in a way, it was key to sort of highlight these weaknesses, but then also we saw the emergence of, or the starting to build of resilience within the urban food system. And we saw that, so the emergence of e-commerce platforms to support the distribution of food. There were also issues of urban food farming discourse that's being brought back to the table in order to shorten the supply chains of food, as well as highlighting the role of women and youth in the provision of food, in access to food. So it was a bit of a balance in building resilience, but then also highlighting some of the key challenges to the urban food system. And I think more importantly, what stood out for us during the campaign is that food is very strategic to the city. Food is very important to the city, and it's such a key entry point to addressing issues related to the SDGs, because it has cross-cutting effects with regard to the health and safety and nutrition of urban citizens, with regard to transport and logistics, with regard to energy, water, and other associated resources. So if it is strategically planned for, it is one of those key systems or that key elements that can drive cities to meet their sustainability goals, to meet their targets, to achieve resilience to climate change. So these are some of the issues that came out during our engagements on the African City Food Month, and we want to continue these discussions in the coming year with the coming versions of the African City Food Month. Sort of start highlighting what are the key challenges, what are the solutions, and what are the different actions that local governments and different stakeholders can take with regard to strengthening the food systems to make it more resilient and more nutritious. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solofina, for those insights. And what I'm hearing is a deep commitment and understanding that the SDGs are not separate and that they are inherently linked to each other. And I would just like to highlight the importance, for me personally, of SDG 17. You know, SDG 17 is all about partnerships and all about working together and to find new ways of collaborating to address these SDGs in a way that is systemic and brings about systemic and sustainable change. And I think it's never more possible than at the local level, as you've said, where we can have tangible examples, which on the one hand provide basic services, which municipalities are supposed to do, but at the same time do it in a way that actually speaks to these global agendas. And I'd like to ask you both to reflect on one aspect. So think about it so long. The Japanese Minister of Environment, very inspirational remarks coming through from him this year around the fact that, yes, in times of COVID, we have to immediately respond, and then we have to obviously rebuild, and then we have to move a step beyond. So it's not just building back better, but it's actually, he's talking about a concept of redesign. In other words, making a paradigm shift. In other words, thinking completely differently about the urban future of the world. And in an African context, that may mean many things. I'd like to hear from you what you think this redesign of our cities could be or should entail. But before we do that, Paul, I see that you and Solo both have your Rise Africa banners there in your background. I'd like to just ask you very briefly, why Rise Africa? What is it? And how can everybody in this forum be part of Rise Africa as we move into 2021?
Thanks, Kobe. Yes, we're very proud of our banners and want to draw as many people into this conversation. Rise Africa has been framed as a platform for drawing together different stakeholders across business, government, civil society, drawing in citizens who feel strongly about their cities and about shaping inclusive and sustainable spaces. And the frame is about inspiring action for sustainable cities. And I think it's come out of a lot of meetings in which people voice frustration. We know what we want to do. How do we do it? And so it's really trying to look for the specific levers, inspiring stories of different cases and organizations who are pushing the boundaries and trying new things. And I think your provocation now, Kobe, about what are we going to take away from COVID is something that we would like to explore. You know, we've all been in a bit of an experiment. So maybe to dive into that reflection on my side before we hand over to Sefiani. This has been a period of experimentation, certainly in South Africa, as well as any country that has done a lockdown, of what types of lifestyles we are able to take on. So I think our own introspection is about what worked about those. For example, most organizations now understand that telecommuting is quite possible. So what does that mean for our mobility systems? What does it mean when office blocks don't necessarily become a central space? Can we shift and look at mixed land use or mixed property use for mixing residential, as we've always wanted to do, in with office areas, and improve urban safety by bringing people closer to work, and improve access by bringing people closer to work? So I think COVID represents this moment of exploring what's possible, but also acknowledging, as Sefiani has reflected, all of these structural issues. So if we can acknowledge structural issues, look for the levers that can shift them, and understand our personal roles and organizational roles moving forward, especially because it's going to be a few years of austerity, which really requires innovation. That's important.
Thank you, Paul, for those reflections and also sharing the Rise Africa background to us. And I think also a warm invitation to everybody here, including the whole Sustainability Week. Let's take hands and see how we can work together on make the dreams and the premises of Agenda 2063 possible for us through movements like Rise Africa and Sustainability Week, etc. Sefiani, your reflections in terms of how coming out of COVID, not saying that we are. In fact, South Africa is deep in discussions about a second wave. So it's a long time before we'll really be out of COVID-19. But in terms of redesigning, here is an opportunity to press a reset button and to maybe look at things with fresh eyes. What would be your gut feeling, having listened and spoken and engaged with so many mayors across the continent? What can we do? What should we be aspiring to if we redesign our future?
Thank you so much, Kobe, for that. And I think also Paul begins to also highlight some of the key reflections. And to me personally, I think we can, at this particular point in time, we have to think more about people, you know, understanding people-centered development as, and it's one of our pathways at ICLEI as a way of achieving the SDGs, but then as a way of service delivery. You know, people are at the center of all of the discourse. And we saw it particularly in the pandemic that the most affected were the vulnerable. in terms of housing, in terms of access to food, in terms of access to health services. So there were a lot of cracks or a lot of or inequalities that were displayed at this particular point in time. And I think moving forward, this is a beginning point to start addressing issues of resilience in the food in different systems. So I think moving forward, putting people at the center of development and people at different discourses is going to be very important. So that as we prepare for future maybe future pandemics or future shocks to the system, and then people are taken care of, people have their basic needs, and people have access to services to be able to thrive or survive in terms of future shocks and pandemics or other related shocks to the system.
Thank you, Sefiani. And I think you make a great point there around people-centered development. It is absolutely vital, and we're talking about whole of society, whole of government approaches where people really need to take hands and work together in new ways. And we're looking at, and ICLEI ourselves, and I'm sure many of our colleagues here at the Sustainability Summit are reaching out to partners and are partnering in new ways with new organizations and even with unlikely partners, because it is if we keep on doing things as we do, we will keep on getting the same old results. So we understand deeply, and cities do too, that we've got to change the way we do things. And in doing so, we also have to reach out of our comfort zones and go into partnerships with others. A big issue that has come out throughout the year, and which wasn't directly reflected on in detail in this session, but certainly in many, many other sessions with mayors that we've had this year, is about resource needs. And not only finance, but also people, resources, also clear mandates, strong multi-level governance structures, where different levels of government within countries can work better together, and also better together to access funds to where it's needed most. And that's needed most at the local level. We're hearing quite phenomenal statistics coming in. I've heard a figure the other day of that 54% of all revenue that was going to go to, and that historically went to local governments across Africa, has been eroded already by COVID-19. So it's not going to get better from the fiscus process, from within national government processes to move money towards municipalities. Therefore, municipalities of the future, in terms of redesign, will also have to redesign their thinking and their approaches around income generation. And there maybe lies innovation to be untapped. And this is in partnering with the private sector, because ultimately the private sector wants to operate in a city that functions well and that has those basic services and provides a safe, livable quality of life environment for people to live in, also for their workforces, but also for their customers to come and buy their goods and trade with them. So, but it is the responsibility as well, more than ever, for the local governments to reach out to and make it easier for the private sector to engage with them. So I think our time is up. I want to ask one closing statement from Paul, as our leader of our urban systems team, in terms of next year. What is your biggest ambition for next year working with mayors on the continent? And with that, we will then also wrap this session up.
I think this forced shift onto online platforms has been a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that we've been able to be more inclusive in who we reach. We haven't had to fly people in, which means we can now have meetings where we get perspectives from more and more people in cities. But at the same time, given data limitations, we also are excluding. And so I think my dearest goal for next year is how do we take this online paradigm and extend. We've been really doing well in information sharing between cities and networks, but how do we then translate that into committed actions on the ground? And that's certainly what RISE Africa is looking at, and I think will be a bit of an experimental approach, is how do we inspire people with specific actions, even if they can't necessarily visit them and touch and feel, but can witness them from afar. And I think that'll be a great exploration for next year.
Thank you, Paul. And with this, I'm going to end this session. Thank you very much to everybody that attended. It's been a pleasure for ICLEI Africa to be part of, once again, be part of the Sustainability Week, and particularly this year, the Sustainability Summit 2020. Thank you very much to the organizers. All the best with the rest of the summit. It was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you and goodbye.